My name is Nicole Pompilio. I am the Student Programs Manager here at the Center, and I am going to ask some questions of our fellows alongside Harry, and I will hand it over.
Hey everyone, for those that don't know me, which might be, nobody knows me except Taya, that's it. I'm Harry Burke, I run the Fellows Program, so I get to work with these two amazing women here to our left that we're going to meet in a second. So I guess I'll just jump right into it, and I will start with introductions to these two. So we'll start with Gloria. So Gloria Molina, wow. In 1982, Gloria made history as the first Chicana elected to the California State Assembly. In this role, she combined passionate advocacy with formidable political skill to strengthen communities in the 56th Assembly District and statewide. And then in 1991, she became the first Latina to join the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors, where she was known as a fiscal watchdog, committed to good government reforms, maintenance of the county's public health care delivery systems, and quality of life issues. She's a proud daughter of a Mexican mother and Mexican-American father, and represented LA's 1st District on the Board of Supervisors for more than 2 decades. She, growing up in the Pico Rivera area, she learned that eliminating unfair barriers is the best way to ensure equal opportunity. From founding East LA's Commission Feminal Mexicana, I'm so sorry, Gloria, to serving in the Carter White House, that idea has driven her lifelong commitment to public service. Now, Nichol is the Chief Executive Officer of the award-winning Los Angeles Dodgers Foundation. Under her leadership, the Los Angeles Dodgers Foundation tackles the most pressing problems facing Los Angeles with a mission to improve education, healthcare, homelessness, and social justice for all Angelinos. During her tenure, the Los Angeles Dodgers Foundation launched incredibly impactful programming, including Dodgers RBI, a youth development initiative serving more than 10,000 youth today. She's been recognized throughout the industry for her exceptional contributions, having earned the 2020 National Medical Fellowship Leadership in Philanthropy Award, the 2020 Visionary Award presented by Southern California Leadership Network, and the most motivating our students. Sorry, cut off. The most motivating our students award.
Yes, you got it. That's basically it. Yes.
Great. So those are our 2 fellows for the fall 2021 semester. And I guess I will start with the first question. Right? Great. So let's start with Nicole. Very basic first question. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Give a little bit of a snapshot, but maybe a more forward picture. Your history, especially for all of our students that haven't met you.
Yeah, nice to meet you all. I'm really excited to be here this afternoon. As Harry mentioned, my name is Nicole Whiteman. I'm the CEO of the Los Angeles Dodgers Foundation, and truly what that means is that I run the charitable efforts and the charitable nonprofit associated with the team. You heard the focus areas that we are focused on, but I'll give you a little bit about my background and how I got there. So I'm a New York native. I've been in Los Angeles for about 20 years now. One of 5 children that my parents had who are both immigrants to this country from Jamaica. I'm a first-generation college graduate, first-generation American. When I was 14 years old, I had the opportunity through a program called The Better Chance to go to a private boarding school in New Milford, Connecticut. So I left New York, leaving home, going to college at the age of 14, lived on a campus for 4 years. Loved my experience at Canterbury School, got to play soccer. Sports played a significant aspect of my life, especially my high school years. And when I was graduating, I had the opportunity to look at, obviously, a number of colleges just because of the high school that had prepared me so well. I ended up choosing Spelman College, which is a historically Black college and university for all women in Atlanta. Really proud to say that my son, who is 18, and my youngest is 13, actually just committed to Morehouse College about last week. And so Morehouse is the brother school to Spelman, the sister school. I studied economics with a minor in management and organization. I lived my entire childhood saying I was going back to New York City to be an investment banker on Wall Street. I got the chance to live out that first part of my dream because I was offered a job with JP Morgan Chase when I graduated from college, went to New York, did the investment banking thing for almost 2 years, but realized quite quickly that it was not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I did major networking in New York City, as that is what people do in that city. It's a great place to move around, meet new people, and all of the above, the melting pot of a lot of things. And I had the opportunity to go work in publishing. So I worked for 2 magazines, Black Enterprise Magazine and Essence Magazine, in sponsorship, marketing, and advertising. And I moved to Los Angeles while working for Black Enterprise Magazine, really because I just wanted the sun and the beach of California. My husband and I had recently been engaged, and we said we'd be here for 2 years. 20 years later, obviously, we didn't leave. And while I was working for Black Enterprise, I met the president and CEO of the Jackie Robinson Foundation, and I received a Jackie Robinson Foundation scholarship to attend college, to go to Spelman. And she said, we're opening up an LA office, a satellite to our New York office, and we'd love for you to come lead it. And I had not done any work in the nonprofit space at all, but she said, you, as a product of our foundation, and frankly, the business acumen that you've gained so far in your career, you'd be great. I thought about it for a while, decided to take the position, and that was my beginning into philanthropy, frankly, and into the nonprofit space. Loved being in the education scholarship world. I did that for about 6 years. And then I really wanted to understand Los Angeles a lot better. As you heard already, I have 2 sons, and having not grown up here, I think it was important for me to be on the ground and not necessarily on a plane every week, which was kind of what my situation was with the Jackie Robinson Foundation. So I took a job with LA's Promise, which is now LA's Promise Fund, as the Vice President of Development and Communications, specifically focused on school reform for schools in South Los Angeles, very close to USC, Manual Arts High School and John Muir Middle School, and really just got a chance to understand the Los Angeles Unified School District and to understand a city and frankly the second largest school district in the country and how it operates and where there are challenges and opportunities. School reform is hard, really hard. And I spent less than 2 years doing that before a recruiter called me and said, we want you to be the executive director of College Summit. I stepped away to be the executive director of a college access organization that provides high school students with a class in their classes every single day, like advisory, to prepare them for college from 9th to 12th grade. And so I was overseeing the San Francisco and the LA office when the Dodgers Foundation, drafted me to do what I do now. So in 2013, I started to do this work. I was handed a new name and a new logo. Unfortunately, under the former ownership group, this was called the Dodgers Dream Foundation. But there was a nasty divorce of the former ownership group that was pretty public. And so there was a need to rebuild the foundation. So we changed our name to the Los Angeles Dodgers Foundation. We changed our logo and we started all over again. So the last 9 years, what you see is the new LADF, the new iteration of LADF. It has a lot of the old bones and the original mission, per se, to really serve underserved communities in the city of Los Angeles and to use our brand as a champion and as an advocate for people who obviously need us the most. So really passionate about what I do. I always talk to people about the kids that we serve, or the kid that I was. I'm the beneficiary of a lot of nonprofit organizations, and I do believe that there's a community that you can create there to really give kids a chance to thrive.
So, Gloria, first off, thank you, Nicole. That was
Amazing. Yeah.
Thank you. This mask is so hard. I just want to say that.
It is impossible, and it's so hot in here.
Yeah. So can you just tell us, Gloria, a little bit about yourself, your history, for students that have met you?
I have a long history as a community activist. That's how I started, basically as an anti-war activist when I was going to college in the Latino community, and participated in that, and then also became an activist as a feminist, finding that the men in our community and all the activist roles that they had really segregated us, and we were usually the ones that made the menudo, and at that time, you mimeograph flyers, which is a long time ago. But anyway, so we started a feminist organization called Comisión Femenil Mexicana Nacional. We were a pro-choice group, which is very unusual in the Latino community. And basically an activist in supporting women, a lot of educational programming and things that we wanted to have done. Basically testifying, creating programs, and trying to find those ways to get attention from funders and others about the importance of the Latina and how she could not work if she didn't have the supportive services that she needed, like childcare and other kinds of things like that. So we did a lot of advocacy in that area, and of course also supported a lot of Latino elected officials to get elected. we as women would come together, and we're kind of known as stickers and lickers in those campaigns. They needed a lot of volunteers at the time. And eventually in 1970, because of the census then, they created 2 additional congressional seats in Southern California. We thought it was a great opportunity to run the first Latina ever that might be able to go into the U.S. Congress. And so we approached the powers that be, which were all men in our community, and of course, they dismissed us and said they had already selected 2 men who were going to be running for those seats. It was very disappointing because we had been very supportive of them all of this time. And then, of course, which is why we created the organization. So we had to step up, and in 1982, all of this time working as an activist, basically decided that we wanted to run a Latina for a state legislative seat. Unfortunately, as it was very intimidating, the guys created quite an environment around the community that we could not get elected. I decided to run. I was originally going to be the campaign manager and the fundraiser, but I ended up being the candidate. And I also knew that if I lost, I had to move out of town because these guys were very vindictive. But luckily, in 1982, I beat them and became the first Chicana. I like to call myself Latina Chicana in the California State Legislature. And I'm really proud that I have been followed by a lot of wonderful Latinas since then. I moved to the Los Angeles City Council in the same way because there was a seat that came up because of reapportionment. I ran for that seat against the guys again, and I beat them again, luckily, and I got to serve in that role. And then finally, also because of redistricting, the County Board of Supervisors had been sued for over 20 years. MALDEF had been fighting a lawsuit against LA County for the kind of gerrymandering that they had done, particularly with minority communities. So finally, the lawsuit was won and went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Board of Supervisors, all 5 white men, they would not draw such lines. They would not draw new lines. So the judge took it upon himself, and he's the one that drew the new lines. And it basically have survived for the last 20, 25 years. And so I ran for that seat with 9 other candidates, and luckily became the first Latina to serve. Anyway, I've loved my role as an activist. I continue to play an activist role in a lot of leadership roles in different areas of trying to get more women elected to office, certainly being supportive of young women, trying to create programming in supportive services for young women. I love the policy aspect of being an elected official. Dislike tremendously the political aspect of it. And very frankly, you need to have both. I guess I can say that because I have been elected for so many years that I guess it is my career. I consider it to be an honorable career, although there are many who embarrass us along the way, regrettably. But I've enjoyed that role. And again, I continue to be an activist in the community. I created La Plaza Cultura y Artes, which is a museum near Olvera Street. Hopefully you'll get to visit eventually, which is basically the contributions of Mexican Americans to the building of Los Angeles. It's almost a founder's museum. And then I serve on the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund Board, and I'm presently the chair of the California Community Foundation, which is one of the largest community foundations, at least in California. And so very proud to be doing that work. So I'm supposed to be retired, but, but here I am, keeping myself busy, still enjoying being an activist.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. I have the first question. Harry, I'm going to ask a couple so that the students can ask you them.
Okay.
But my first question is about mentors. I'm sure that both of you are mentors to people now, but when you were coming up on your career path, just like these students are, how important have mentors been in your journey, and how do students go about finding them?
Yeah.
And either one. Nicole can go first.
I think in my story, you guys heard a lot about me talk about organizations that supported me through, and with every single one of those organizations, there were individuals who were my champions, who were my advocates, who really pushed me forward. I feel like mentors are very important people. You have different mentors at different times of your life. They don't ever all have to go away, but I think you end up creating this collection of mentors is what I've done specifically. needing very different people for different things, but also wanting it to be very diverse. Some people look at mentorship and they say, okay, it's supposed to be somebody that looks like me and exactly has the same shared experiences. I actually disagree. I think you should have that person, but I also think that you should have additional people in your life who actually might not be who you are and completely, quite frankly, could be the opposite, because I think that could be helpful for you. Mentorship is about getting honest advice and honest opinion, and frankly, having an honest cheerleader, right? So you need someone, yes, who's celebrating you, but you also need someone who's going to push you down the right path. And so that's the way I've seen mentorship. I find that mentorship, frankly, coupled with sponsorship, which I won't get into because you didn't ask that question, but we can talk about it later if someone would like to, are sort of been some of the key ingredients in my life, and two very, I consider kind of distinctly different things that I think are very important.
For me, mentorship is empowerment. I've always looked at every responsibility, everything that we do, as an opportunity to empower someone else. First of all, you set the example by doing the job that you're doing, or whatever role you're in, and being responsible and taking a real leadership role in that area. But it is about empowering others to get involved in whatever issue, or if they're working for you. I've always tried to empower my staff, and I feel the same way when I was whether a member of the city council or board of supervisors. I like to empower the community, that we're not there to do these things for them. Instead, we need to empower the community to make sure that they're getting these things done for themselves, instead of just relying on a council person or someone to do it. I have had great fortune in having wonderful mentors all around my life, and they're all different and in different arenas, but I've always been impressed with women that I have met and have had an opportunity to work with them and be challenged by them. And I think it's a very, very kind of different experience. Not that I did not have male mentors, because I did, but having a woman as a mentor has been a very, very positive thing, and it works very, very well. And I see that they gave to me, and now I have to turn around and give it back to the community. But mentorship and empowerment go hand in hand.
Great. I have a broad question, but maybe a couple follow-ups as well. If we can add some more thoughts afterwards, but it's really around this idea of networking, which I've done this event with fellows before, and I don't like that word networking, because I think it implies like transactional, strictly speaking, you know what I mean, versus building, like what you guys have said about mentors, building a relationship, getting advice, and things like that. But it's a word that is thrown around a lot in all professional settings, networking. I've noticed, though, that there's no class on networking, you know. It's a lot of it is intuitive or learning from mentors. So I guess my question for you guys, whoever wants to start can do so, but how important is networking really?
Well, for me, it has played a very significant role.
Yeah.
And I never looked at it, oh, I've got to go network. I never looked at it that way.
Right.
But at the end of the day, that's what I was doing, is meeting people, finding out about them, having an opportunity to kind of listen to their story, and have an opportunity to interface with them and find collaborative opportunities with them, which I guess is all networking. And it's always been very, very significant role of what I'm doing, even though I didn't realize I was doing it. Today, it's kind of hard because there's so much internet, and there's a lot of social networking. I really don't know how to do. I really don't.
Do you have a LinkedIn profile, Gloria?
What is that?
A LinkedIn profile?
You know, I'm on there, but it's just like Facebook. It is lovely to see what other people are posting occasionally. Sometimes it's not. I try not to do it, and then I never post, because I don't want anyone to know what I'm doing. I don't want them to know what kind of food I'm eating, or where I'm going, or so on. But I do think that there are great opportunities in the whole social networking opportunity to hook up with right groups, with following, and other people, and get motivated by them. You have to keep and watch out for it, because it can be a very invasive as far as your privacy is concerned. But I don't have a lot of experience, so I shouldn't even speak about it. But it's now such a changed environment, and particularly with the pandemic, there aren't as many opportunities to do the kinds of networking that we do. But we're involved in networking all the time with our colleagues, our friends. It's something that goes on all the time. It's just that as you pursue a career, as you pursue opportunities, you should look forward to opportunities to network with new folks, new people, get new ideas, and learn a lot about yourself and others.
I would second everything that Gloria said, but also say that networking certainly for me particularly was a big part of my success, and that in-person networking. So when I think about my college friends and us coming out of school and those initial career years, we spent a lot of time purposefully at networking events. We put ourselves in rooms in our industry, outside of our industry, rooms related to hobbies, interests, etc., because we were collecting people. We were literally building a Rolodex that many of us still use today. If I think about it today, and I think about what we were just talking about, referring to LinkedIn, etc., the last maybe 10 years of my life, I'm probably a significant networker online and offline. I'm a fundraiser. And so every single day, a significant part of my job is raising dollars to support the programs, the community programs that we either run or other nonprofits that we fund. And so particularly during the pandemic, LinkedIn became networking crazy. Like if you all are on it, you know that it changed in a lot of ways, but in a really good way. But I still feel like people need to find the balance, and that the face-to-face piece is just as important. There's nothing like that social interaction and that relationship that really helps you understand a person. I think there is something you just don't get through that screen. So I'm a network encourager. I will tell you, as I've gotten older, networking can be exhausting. With a family, being a wife and a mother, it's been like a struggle sometimes to be everywhere every night. We live in a city where the traffic is not friendly. We're not using, or at least I'm not using metro or transportation to just get places in 15 minutes here and there like some other cities operate. But I think it's important to purposefully network, to purposefully put yourself in rooms where you know that it might even be an awkward conversation, but that awkward conversation with that person that you met might help you 5-10 years from now in terms of they may remember you, they remember something that you said. You may take that business card and put it in your stash, but 10 years from now, you might pull that business card out because it's important. That person may be related to a job you want to get, or someone else needs to know that person, and you're like, hey, I can help you out with that. There's a lot of reasons why I think it's really important.
Great. Well, I think we're going to, for the next 25 minutes.
I definitely have more questions, but I don't want to give it to the students. So we're going to pass this around. So whoever wants to go first, just raise your hand and we can grab it.
Yeah.
You guys keep that.
Okay.
Thank you. Hi guys, my name's Billy. I'm a sophomore here, and I'm a poli-sci major. And as a poli-sci major, I feel like a lot of people have told me, and especially some USC professors, that a law degree is almost essential if I want to work in any aspect of politics. And I'm just wondering, in today's day and age, how do you guys view a law degree, and is it as beneficial as some people have been trying to portray?
To have a law degree?
Yeah, to work in any degree in politics. I'm sure a lot of poli-sci majors here are probably going to be going to law school and aren't sure whether or not they're going to practice law. And that's kind of where I'm at. I don't know exactly if I want to go into politics, if I need a law degree or not.
Well, I do think, and I know I look upon people who are lawyers, even if they're not practicing law, I do not know why seem like they're just so much more than just having a bachelor's or even master's. I think it's a lot. I worked with lawyers for a long time as a legal secretary when I was younger. But I think having a law degree it's really, no one will question you as far as your credentials at all. I think it's really valuable to have it, even if you never practice law. By the way, I have a lot of friends who struggled and worked so hard to get to law school, work at law school, and then try and pass the bar and do not practice law at all. And they've gone on to do all kinds of interesting jobs. But I think that legal degree helped them tremendously. It's something that I always wish I had. I think it would have been, I challenged myself to be somewhat like a lawyer in many respects, particularly in the work that I do. But I really think that people would not question you personally as far as your capability and your strength once you're a lawyer. It just sort of carries a certain kind of, I don't know what it is, but it does. And so if you can do it, if you can attend law school, and even if you don't practice law, I think it's something that'll be very valuable for your future.
And I would add that I don't think there's any negative to a law degree, and there is a certain level of esteem and gravitas that comes with individuals who say they have a law degree. Funny story in my life is I started out at Spelman as a political science major because my dad, I mentioned to you guys, my parents are immigrants to this country. They knew two professions, law or a doctor. And even when I was talking about this whole, I'm coming back to New York to this investment banking thing, they were just like, well, those people, I mean, what do they do? Like they clearly, even though we lived in New York City, still were not clear on stock market and all of that, right? So we laugh in my family about how probably as old as I am, even up to about maybe 7 years ago, my dad was telling people I was going to law school until he decided one day to really sit down and figure out what I do and was like, oh, okay, that's actually pretty great. Jeez, I'll stop saying that because I was like, you really need to stop saying that. But there is, I say all that to say there is an esteem that comes with saying that you've gone, that you have a law degree, but that doesn't mean you have to practice law. I think similar to what Gloria said, I have a lot of donors and partners and peers in my work world, period, who are lawyers, but they're in the nonprofit space. You can be a lawyer, and I probably didn't keep my political science major because back then people told me that political science equaled law. You can be a political science major and go into business. There's so many different reasons or ways that just that type of thinking connects to so many different aspects of the world. I think the legal perspective is important in anything that you do. And it is definitely a plus when you think about the recruiting process. Even when I'm hiring, if I'm thinking through and looking through applications, that just really stands out for you. As far as law degree necessary for politics, I don't think that's a yes because of the same flip conversation. If we look at so many of our politicians today and you really think about backgrounds, many don't have a law degree. Yeah. Business goes that way. There's a couple different degrees that go that way.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah.
So this question I think is more specifically for you, Gloria. Also, I'm Taya and I'm a junior. I think I've briefly met both of you before.
And staff.
She works for the
Staff recipient as well, yeah.
She does all the graphics with your guys'.
Yes, that's me, yes. I'm getting over a cold, so my brain's a little bit foggy. But Gloria, for you, you said you worked in so many different levels of government. Can you just talk a little bit about your experience with that and what the differences were that you saw between city and county and state government?
Well, it's interesting. I started in the state legislature. And what's interesting about the state legislature, it's really involved in all aspects of trying everything from criminal justice and healthcare and so on. There's so many issues, but you only legislate. In other words, you just create policy or laws. You're not involved in implementation. And it's interesting, the whole challenge, I guess, as a legislator is just getting your bills passed and getting them signed and getting them onto a law book and so on, but not necessarily ever finding out, did this work? And how was it implemented? And we just move on to the following year, creating a whole new set of bills. So that's, as a legislator, that's how you pursued it. I really like coming to the city council because it was very hands-on, very close to constituents. You had an opportunity, again, you didn't legislate in various areas because on the city council, you're probably limited to not only your constituency, but the kinds of issues around the city. But there's a lot of departments and so on. So I really enjoyed interfacing with the community, trying to create empowerment mechanisms for the community, trying to make sure that they were getting services. I represented one of the lowest registered districts in the city, as well as the highest poverty rates, and really a lack of affordable housing. And so these were all things, and these are people who, in many instances, felt that government has really turned against them and aren't really feel comfortable in challenging government or maybe in insisting on getting the services, even getting their streets cleaned. And so I enjoy doing that part of it. But it's not until I got to the Board of Supervisors did I have the full complement. Not only were you legislating because you are introducing policy all of the time, ordinances of all kinds, but you're implementing it as well. So you're getting to see, you're funding it, and you're getting to see how it functions and works, and you get an opportunity to evaluate it. You don't have a time frame like Congress does or the legislature in which to legislate and then you just move on. In this instance, it's constantly working. So whether it's supportive services for healthcare or affordable housing or dealing with the sheriff and many of the police issues and so on, there is an opportunity to consistently be trying to introduce new policy, look at what works, what doesn't work, pull things out by not funding them in many instances because they haven't been functioning or working, and bringing more accountability to government. That is making sure contracts are working, making sure that our bureaucrats are working effectively on behalf of folks, which is a very tough thing to do, by the way. But I enjoyed that the most. But that was different. The only time I worked for the federal government, I worked in the White House, but I did presidential personnel. We did appointments. I worked for Jimmy Carter. I did go on to work for the federal government. I worked in San Francisco at their, at that time it was health and welfare, and now I think it's HEW, it's education as well. And so we did a lot of issues, we worked on a lot of issues of refugee resettlement at that time because we were resettling a lot of Vietnamese refugees. And so it was a good opportunity to work with federal government at that level. But I really do think that the best of all was working at a county level because it's hands-on, it's continuous all the time. You're involved directly in funding a program, creating policy, implementing, making sure it works.
Awesome. Thank you.
Much more comprehensive. Next.
Hi, thank you guys for being here. My name is Landon. I'm a senior majoring in health and human sciences. So I think in both of the work you guys do, it's the allure is to make an impact and to help people. But what are some like daily frustrations or barriers to like being able to achieve that goal that someone might not talk about in both of the work that you do?
I will say that first and foremost, the need can be so great that pinpointing where to start and where to do it first, second, third, or how to chronologically get it done. I can say that we live in a city where some of the issues that we work on specifically at the Dodgers Foundation are very large issues, right? But there are things that we can do as a nonprofit that might be seen often as like a Band-Aid, meaning that there are deeper bureaucratic things that have to be changed. There's legislation that might be in the way. And so I think sometimes the challenge is understanding how to have an impact that's going to be either sustainable or truly impactful or deep, as opposed to putting Band-Aid on certain situations, right? For me in particular, because I work for a sports team foundation that is part of a very big brand, the Dodgers, there's a huge pro in that in terms of being able to support communities using this brand, because there's a lot of buy-in here in Los Angeles amongst a lot of families who are in challenged situations, who believe that the brand is truly there to care, to help, and to push them forward because they're fans and their families have been fans for generations and generations. But it's hard sometimes for us to get folks to understand that we need funding. We, the Dodgers Foundation, need funding to make that happen. Why don't you just go get it from your billion-dollar owners? The reality is we do operate as a 501c3 and we have a responsibility to fundraise, but this opportunity to amplify with additional individuals and funders the impact that we can have. So yes, maybe we'll be able to do it for this one community, but how grand would it be if we all did it together? So a challenge sometimes on the fundraising front, and I think a challenge in fundraising period is probably top 3 that any nonprofit management is going to tell you, right? This idea of you want to do really good work, but you have to raise money to do so. And I think saying no. So for me, because I run a foundation that is so big and broad and has such a big brand, we still have criteria. We still have very specific things that we fund. We have very specific things that we will put, programs that we'll put our dollars into. And it's hard when you have fans from all walks of life, from all neighborhoods, from all ethnic groups, who want you to support what they do. So saying no can be really, really hard. But I will say that I think first and foremost, it's just like really understanding where the deep impact can be, because there can be so many other layers behind that. Yeah.
Well, for me, my biggest frustration is how we're seeing less and less people trusting government. And for me, it's frustrating because really, when you are an elected official, you're partnership with the community, you're serving people, and you owe them a duty, and they owe you a duty as well from the standpoint of voting and participating, and hopefully being civic-minded. But regrettably, I think there's a lot of corruption as well within our system, regrettably, that we see from time to time. I think the answer, and I'd love it to happen, but it never will happen, is to take money out of politics. So you don't have to raise money to run for office, that you would have to go out there and hopefully dialogue with people on their front porch and talk to them and convince them to support you, that you're not dependent on special interests that compromise you and compromise your colleagues as well on the issues that need to be taken care of. And I think that special interest is growing stronger every single day. They're getting more control. They're making determinations of who gets elected and who doesn't get elected. And they really don't care how they function and operate as elected officials as long as they take care of their issues. And I think that that's where the distrust is going on. And I really worry. I feel very positive about our democracy, but I think we have to work at it. We really have to work at it. And it requires, and it's sort of what's going on in the class I'm teaching, is about accountability, how each of us need to be involved in some way to making sure that we're electing the right people, that we're watching what's going on, that they aren't getting away with what they do. But the answer would be to get money completely out of politics. Regrettably, the Supreme Court and the Constitution prevents that from happening. So I would like it to be also more of a focused time that you could run for office. In other words, so you're not running all of the time every 2 years. That you're not running all the time having fundraisers and doing it. Instead, you're more involved in legislative responsibilities and duties to your constituents and not having to go out and campaign all of the time. And that's the unfortunate part about it. So it's sort of a vicious cycle, regrettably. But I don't think we'll ever be able to get money out of it. But in the meantime, I do think that we all can be a part of making it more effective, watching what's going on, keeping special interest out as much as possible.
Thank you.
You can go first.
Okay. Hi, I'm Coleman or Cole. I'm a freshman studying public policy. I guess from both of you, when listening to your narratives and your careers as a whole in your lives, something you both shared in common was being the first in something, being a trailblazer, whether that be being first generation, whether that be for the first Chicana. I think that, as also a first generation student, I have a lot of people to look up to that share the same identity as me. While I might be the first in my family, there's another Korean American, in something that I might pursue later on. But then with you two both being trailblazers, you definitely faced a lot of opposition, and there weren't these people before you. There wasn't another Chicana Assemblywoman before you. So thus, you faced a lot of opposition, as specifically Gloria mentioned. What did you both do to kind of get over that on the mental level? And how do you persevere to move through everything as a trailblazer?
Well, we all go through tough times, and it's hard sometimes to, you just got to get elected, and then you're constantly struggling, and particularly being the first, you're the only person there. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of stereotypes that's your baggage that you carry into the room and that you have to overcome. And I remember even colleagues of mine just said a lot of insulting things to me at the time that they didn't realize, but they thought they were very complimentary, gee, it's interesting, you don't speak with an accent at all. And it's, why should I? I was born here, I went to school here. But anyway, there were a lot of things like that. But, I'm the oldest of 10 in my family, and my mother started very early at 3 and 5 years old reminding me that I'm the oldest and I had to set the example. And I think that has followed me all the way through, and I think it should follow you as well. Because when you're a first like this, in your family or in your community or in your, who you represent, you really have to set a good example. Why? Because we're a minority in these areas and people are looking at us. And they're quick to judge when you make a mistake and write a whole community off instead of, oh, it's just, And so I've always think that setting an example, particularly is really important. It's also frustrating, and being, kind of the only one is tough because sometimes there aren't the folks that you can talk to and relate to on some of these issues. But I've always found my way, and I never cried in public, even though sometimes they said and did things to me that I felt like crying in public, but I never did that. I have cussed in public at times. But you really have to kind of take all that negative and turn around and use it against them. That's what you need to do, if that's what it's going to be. It's not the way I like to operate, because I think what I'm doing is much larger than these folks that are there that are making these petty comments. But I know that I made a very passionate speech once at the Board of Supervisors on this item, and my colleague decided to make a comment that I was having a, what do they call it, menopause, when you have a hot
flash.
Hot flash.
Yes.
And it's always been like that. So occasionally you have those kinds, and you cannot just, I wanted to beat them up, but I couldn't do that. But instead I had to win the issue. It was really, it made me more passionate about what I was working with and what I was doing. But that's the nature, and wherever you go, whatever you're going to do, you're always going to be an official. Believe it or not, you will be. And people will be looking to you, and particularly when you're a minority, they're going to be looking to you, and you're going to represent much more than that. And then the other part of it is that frustration and hurdles and obstacles are part of it, but I think in the long run, it makes you stronger and much more effective. So it's challenging, and you wish it wasn't there, but most of us who've been minorities have known that we have to work harder just to be equal. And if you do that, then I think you can be very successful.
Yeah, I think first, anything was a stigma for me growing up. Probably, I don't know, maybe the last 15 years of my life, I've really worn this first generation anything with a badge of honor. And that's because people encouraged me to tell my story. And when I started to tell my story, they were like, wow, there's so much in there that could be helpful to other people. There's so much in my story that frankly can be helpful to my own children, as motivation, as inspiration, what you can achieve if you are the first, or what you should be building on because somebody was the first. I remember when I was in high school, at the boarding school that I mentioned to you all, I was the only Black person in my class all 4 years. Really tough experience. I didn't tell anybody it was the first to anything, because I didn't feel like the environment was conducive to first. I felt like first was a bad thing. It was a really terrible thing. That means that I'm not part of this group. That means I'm not part of this. And I think things were said and done that may not have been directly at me, but none of those things made me feel like saying that I was a first generation. Anything made sense. I don't even think at the time I knew that I was trailblazing, the word that you used, right? But I think at a certain point something clicks for you, whether a mentor tells you or you start to tell your story and people start to ask very specific questions, or your children ask questions, and you realize that if you carry those badges, they can be really important for other people to see that as an example. And I think to your point, right, if it's the first in your family, that's a really personal, very proud place, even if there is a first in someplace else, right? Or it's your cousin and not your immediate household, etc. I just think that you use that to pay it forward in a lot of different ways. You use that to frankly be an example. And I think it's a badge, meaning it's not a negative in that I was given anything or handed anything because I was a first, right? It's a badge in that it can be used as an example moving forward. And sometimes it tells the story of how hard you've actually worked to become that first or to be that first. We've made a lot of progress, but I will say that I hate still being the first in a lot of places and in certain rooms and things of that nature. But I think we're getting better at that. And I think there's a big conversation. Like you get to certain spaces and there's more than one person in the room who raises their hand and says, I'm first generation, college grad. There's more than one person, but that used to be a little bit of a negative, but I think it's a badge. Yeah.
Thank you. Sasha? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sasha. I'm studying political econ and chemistry. So my question is about, you guys both live very busy lives like at work, but then also have families at home. So how do you maintain like that work-life balance within the field of politics?
Striking a balance is really important, and it is hard, but I really try to say to myself that I stay very dedicated. When I'm working, I am working, and that's what I'm doing. And I try not to, even though I'm with my child and so on, to disrupt what I'm doing when I'm working. Sometimes it does. But at the same time, when I'm at home, I also don't like to be, I like to be focused in my home and focused with my family. And sometimes that, when you're elected official, you get stopped at the supermarket all the time and asked to fix this stop sign or street sign or do something. And that's the nature of it, and you have to be patient about it. But striking a balance is really good, and you have to take care of yourself in the process. Because we're in very challenging kind of roles. We have tremendous demands. And yet, really what we do is really important work, and we want to do it well. And we want to maintain a family as well, and that's very important to us, and we want to do that as well. But in there, you have to find that time that you take care of yourself as well. Setting aside time for yourself, trying to find that little space that's all yours, devoting yourself in some instance to a hobby or something that you enjoy that's just you. And because you have to take care of yourself. If you're going to go the distance, you have to make sure you're taking care of yourself. So it's creating that kind of balance. And I think that's true even as a young person today, and the challenges of going to school and having fun and having friendships and having family. That's all trying to find a balance in all of it. We're doing it all of the time. And trying to strike that balance is really important. And it's what you're going to do most of your life. I don't think you have to be either or. You don't have to be a great politician with no family. You don't have to be a great family person and not be able to pursue a career, not be a mom and do this thing. I think you can do all of those things. It's going to be challenging, but it's always challenging. It's just you always have to find the right balance.
Yeah, I am still looking for the answer to your question. Balance is really, really hard. As Gloria mentioned, in service careers, and particularly for me in nonprofit and advocacy, the need doesn't go away. And so I often tell people, just because I do it associated with the baseball season, because there was a last out in the National League Championship Series last week, that last out impacted some people in our franchise, but it didn't impact the Dodgers Foundation. The work is 365 days a year, but you have to try not to make it that. So I work, there's no such 9 to 5 hours in my schedule. If it were possible, I'd be on all the time. Like there would be no sleep or anything. Community events happen on Saturdays, various things happen on Sundays, fundraising dinners happen at night, breakfast meetings happen in the morning. When we are in season, I could be at the stadium at 9 o'clock in the morning for a typical work day. A game can start at 7:10 and end at 10:30. It can be grueling. You have to carve out, to Gloria's point, your time, your self-care, and your everything. I sort of learned that really late in life. Because I'd sort of been in this like hustler mode my entire life, this like striving towards excellence, but not understanding that excellence wasn't perfection and that perfection cannot be achieved by working 24 hours a day. That's actually unproductive. So that doesn't make sense. I think that layer of mother and wife adds a whole nother balance, right? Because I say to people all the time, marriage is a job. It's a great job, but it's a job. And so is motherhood. It's a great job, but it's a job. And so for me, I think as each of my children came into my life, I feel like You carry a certain sense of guilt as a mother. Right now, I'm sort of patting myself on the back because my son is 18 and going to college, and I'm like, okay, I guess I didn't kill you. Like, you're going to be okay. This worked itself out. But there was a lot of guilt associated with being a working mother in the industries that I chose to be in, and particularly when I hit this nonprofit space, realizing how grueling it is. And if you have a passion for something, sometimes you don't know how to turn off, right? And so I'm really passionate about what I do. Our cell phones, our computers, technology made it even harder to do so. We just couldn't escape it, right? Pandemic's been interesting because as most of us were locked in our homes, quarantine, it was even hard to separate the work, right? Your home became your office. And so I feel like I'm trying to pull myself out of that right now in terms of balance, in terms of where does the work lie, where does the personal space lie. One of the things I love about the mix is my children, for as long as they've both sort of been on the earth, they've seen me do work that is service-oriented, and they understand the difference between privilege and not. And frankly, I do love that they've been able to enjoy the game of baseball to the extent. So having done things that actually have involved them in my work has been somewhat of how I've sort of defined and pretended that it's balance. But with every year, I'm trying to figure out where is that space and making sure that I carve out that space for myself, right? And sometimes it's taking that vacation and just shutting off the world. Sometimes it's just going for that hike because you just need to get away. But you've got to carve out those things that are really important to you. But I have no doubt you can be a nonprofit professional or an advocacy professional or a politician and have a family and have all of those things at the same time. No doubt.
We have time for one more question. So does someone want to be the question asker? No questions? Thea?
Oh, no.
Kiara?
You go ahead. Okay. Hi, my name is Kiara. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm a senior, and I study philosophy, politics, and law, and I minor in gender and sexuality studies. My question is, we talked about like networking and having mentors, and you mentioned something about like having someone like
a sponsor. Yes.
But I guess my question is, how do we start those relationships and make them like authentic and genuine and not just these like networking relationships?
Yeah, so first my definition of a sponsor. So a mentor is somebody who I might literally talk to, as I mentioned before, about things that are happening in my life and in my career that I want advice from and suggestion, etc. Mm-hmm. A sponsor is somebody who, frankly, to me, is going to help push your career forward or push your education piece forward with whatever you're looking for, and frankly, talk about you when you're not in the room. So mentors, a lot of people take on mentors who are actually not in the spaces that they're in on a daily basis. They talk to people who are outside of the spaces that they're in on a daily basis. But to have a sponsor, someone who exists in your world, who talks about you when that position becomes open or when that grade is needed to happen or when they need to select a student or in your career someone for something in particular, I think it's important to have sponsors, people who are going to stand up for you and going to speak up for you and going to put your name forth when a promotion is necessary or things of that matter. So I just want to define sponsor. I think that some of these things happen organically, mentors or sponsors, where you just run into folks, some of it, and take advantage of that organic piece. Like sometimes we meet people and we're saying hello and we're having conversations and we're like, oh, who's that? And we're sort of annoyed and all that. Some of those things are happening for a reason. Just put them in your back pocket and later on you might figure out why you met that person or what was the purpose in that. Some of it is, as I mentioned before, I think you have to put yourself in places. You have to intentionally decide that a portion of your job in life is to be in certain places, at certain events, in certain rooms. Risk-taking, frankly. So as a student, are you taking classes that aren't necessarily completely attached to your major, but that are teaching you something different so you can meet a different set of people or meet a new professor or things of that nature? So I think it's like intentional that you really do have to place yourself in places. I also think you have to ask. I think it's really important not to be afraid to ask someone to be your mentor and to ask someone to be your sponsor. We make a lot of assumptions that people are too busy and they'll say no and all of those kinds of things, but some people thrive off of that. I know I thrive off of my mentees. I feel like it helps me stay on top of my toes, frankly, and it helps me to continue to pay it forward. So I like when people ask me to mentor them. I like when people say to me, hey, I think you're someone who is my sponsor, who is showing up for me in rooms where, I'm not. I think that's important. So I think it's about being a little intentional. I think some of it happens organically, but I think you have to ask and you have to be a little bit on purpose.
Can I just add that my pathway was through volunteering. I volunteered for everything. I remember volunteering for the East LA Rape Hotline, where I was working a midnight shift from midnight till 4 in the morning. And I did volunteers in campaigns. I volunteered for a woman's program that did employment training. And I volunteered and tutored young women in the housing projects. All of that has been a real pathway for me to meet people, to find interest in areas that I never thought I'd have an interest in politics. But my interest in trying to move some of the issues in my community forward really required me to interface politically, and I became very interested in politics. But I think volunteering is a big pathway. Finding a way that you can make a contribution, use your skill set, people will notice it. And they will probably help you along the way. Somehow that worked for me in everything that I did. I offered to volunteer for the Carter Mondale campaign way back when he was running. And I ended up becoming the coordinator for the Latino vote in California. I was just going to volunteer that day. But, I volunteered for a couple of days, and before you know it, they recruited me to become, and then the same thing, basically after a campaign, usually, everybody wants to go to the White House, everybody wants to go to DC. They basically told us, hey, don't count on it. Only so many people are going to get to go. I didn't think I'd have an opportunity, but again, somebody noticed the work that I did and thought that a good place for me would be in the White House, in office, presidential personnel. So I've had those kinds of opportunities. And it all started with volunteering. So if you can find something that you're interested in, volunteer for it. You're going to probably find people that'll help you, that'll mentor you, that'll give you guidance and move you forward.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I hope that was helpful.
Yeah.
Very helpful.
Great question.